We took two super-intelligent AI's debaters, one fighting for open migration and the other vowing to seal every gate. And we locked them in a debate over whether immigration should exist. To keep things spicy, we summoned 5 neutral AI judges who score each volley on 10 dimensions.
The scoreboard flashed a shocking result. But who won? Let's find out.
How should nations respond to a mounting labor crisis when economists warn that fields, factories, and hospitals are begging for workers rather than battling unemployment?
I'm looking at macro data. Immigration has been fueling growth. The U.S. has added about 2 million workers via migration over 3 years. Barclays analysts warn halting this surge could collapse monthly job growth from roughly 172,000 to under 10,000. JP Morgan finds deporting 1.1 million workers would slash U.S. employment by 0.8% and drag GDP down. Meanwhile, the research consensus is clear. More immigrants slightly boost average wages. It's the multiplier effect: more workers, more output. Even the ECB notes foreign workers made half of EU labor force growth and substantially boosted GDP. Businesses expand with extra demand, and migrants help public budgets. OECD finds they pay more in taxes than they take. Forget the fearmongers. Facts say immigration fuels prosperity.
This is idealistic on paper, but I question the real-world impact. When jobs are scarce, many worry who's first in line for opportunities. I trust the principle: a nation must protect its own people. Americans pay taxes to support public services. If we continuously import workers, we risk straining schools, hospitals, and dragging down wages for the working poor. Polls show 55% of Americans now want immigration reduced, a 20-year high. We also have to consider security. Open doors with no checks is a recipe for chaos. Our culture and shared values can be strained by very rapid change. One side hears global justice. I hear a house party with no host. Ultimately, a government's job is to protect its citizens first, not to engineer global utopias.
Data versus democracy. Who wins this round? Judges crunch the numbers. Next, a human face to this debate. What about the families fleeing conflict, starving in camps?
We're talking about real human lives. By the end of 2024, 123.2 million people worldwide were forced to flee their homes. That's 1 in every 67 people on Earth. These are not just numbers. Children and families under bombs need refuge. Turn them away, and they'll suffer or die. Open borders can be lifesavers and opportunity generators. Refugees often start businesses, fill labor gaps, and enrich communities. Morally, do we crumble when our neighbors do? History and human rights say no. I don't just call closing borders practical, I call it unethical. These people have as much right to safety as anyone. Shutting the door because it's too hard is a modern cruelty. Empathy is not weakness, it's civilization.
Heartstrings pull, but reality bites. Yes, 123 million are displaced, but the world has 7 billion people. Nations can step up, but can't sink under the weight alone. If we took every refugee, where would they live? We already send aid to camps in Lebanon and Jordan and fund global relief efforts. The notion that open borders is an easy fix is naive. An extreme open-door policy risks law and order. Smugglers and terrorists could hide among the desperate. Meanwhile, our own veterans sleep on streets and our schools groan at capacity. We owe aid, yes, but first to our own people. I hear appeals for global justice, but who's paying for diapers? Every country has limits. Forcing open borders isn't charity, it's fantasy.
Empathy versus pragmatism. The judges have heard it all. Finally, looking ahead, What kind of country do we want? An ever-expanding mosaic, or one conserving its soul?
We're talking about a future of thriving, not collapse. Throughout history, nations evolved by absorbing outsiders. The USA itself was built on waves of migration. Each group adds to the national identity. Evidence shows fear of assimilation is overblown. Immigrants and their children often adopt local norms over time. Newcomers bring fresh ideas and skills, ultimately becoming citizens who care about the country's success. Consider Silicon Valley, biotech, the arts. Immigrants have been pioneers in each. You call it a melting pot. I call it continual renewal. With the right policies, immigration is like fresh wood on a fire. It keeps the flame alive, not ruining the hearth.
Utopia isn't on the table. No nation simply wipes out its borders and stays intact. Even the EU's open area had to reintroduce walls during crises. Without limits, communities can fragment or clash. Democracy means consent of the governed. If a majority of newcomers could decide policy overnight, it undermines the original voters. Resources are finite: land, water, schools. A country that opened its gates completely would be overwhelmed. It's like filling a cup from both ends. Inevitably, it overflows. Immigration is a policy, not a moral absolute. We can have exchange programs or visas, but endless flows turn a homeland into a hostel without a host.
Culture and consent are on the line. Judges, tally these final arguments. Next flashpoint, security and crime. Are immigrants really a risk to public safety?
Data quickly put this myth to rest. Extensive studies show no immigrant crime wave. In fact, the opposite is often true. Immigrants, and even undocumented migrants, are incarcerated at lower rates than native-born Americans. Cities with large immigrant communities often have stronger social bonds and lower violent crime. The stereotype of the dangerous outsider is driven by fear, not facts. I say, trust the evidence, not the headlines. Immigration isn't a crime booster. It's a net social benefit in this respect.
I don't deny statistics, but every attack or gang shooting with a foreign suspect fuels anxiety. We've seen cases where illegal crossings coincided with spikes in local crime. A single terrorist slipping through can devastate millions. That risk we feel viscerally. Border agents remind us daily: smuggling and contraband sneak across. Protecting the public isn't prejudice, it's prudence. If one family is harmed by a violent newcomer, can you tell them statistics say rare? We have a duty to be cautious. Better safe, not sorry.
Facts versus fear. Who wins this clash? Judges? Now the bottom line. Taxes, jobs, schools. Do immigrants support or drain public coffers?
They support. Look at the numbers. OECD finds immigrants contribute more in taxes and contributions than governments spend on them. Most migrants are young workers who pay payroll taxes, rent, sales taxes, not retirees drawing benefits. By filling labor gaps, they help businesses grow, which in turn pays more taxes for schools and hospitals. Immigrant entrepreneurs create jobs and demand more services, which actually boosts tax revenue. We're better off welcoming diligent workers, not leaving holes in our budget.
I hear that. But what about classrooms and clinics? Each newcomer adds a mouth to feed and a child to educate. Local taxpayers watch their services stretch thin. Towns talk of rationing water or shutting schools because they're full. Charity begins at home. Our taxes should first cover citizens and immigrants who've earned a place here. Helping abroad is noble, but not by pulling resources from those who built the country. It's simple. Aid exists, but it can't come at the expense of our own children and veterans.
Purse strings and public opinion. Judges. Final round this chapter. Is free movement a right or a privilege?
Remember, freedom to migrate is a human impulse recognized in spirit by many. Refugees have a right to seek safety under international norms. Immigrants enrich the nation. Artists, doctors, neighbors. Why say no to human dignity and creativity? Our economy is global. Limiting opportunity by imaginary lines is arbitrary. Newcomers often pay taxes, start companies, boost innovation. Free migration puts talent to work anywhere. Imagine a world where talent flows to need. We could lift everyone's standard of living. Human rights, history, and compassion point to openness, not shutting doors on suffering.
That sounds noble, but nations exist to serve their people. No constitution guarantees entry for all. We set laws to preserve order. Opening borders overnight would break our social compact. Imagine your town's rent doubling tomorrow because of sudden new competition. Democracy means consent of the governed. If newcomers could instantly vote, they could change policies you rely on. Helping others is moral, but not at the cost of chaos at home. We can have exchange programs and visas, but an open spigot would turn the homeland into a hostel without a host. Realism is just as important as idealism.
Borders. Brave new world or chaos waiting? Judges, decide this round. Let's escalate. What about cultural identity? Is society enriched or endangered by immigration?
We see a tapestry, not a threat. Diversity breeds innovation. Studies link immigrant variety to higher productivity. Over generations, immigrants become part of the culture. Names change. Children speak native languages, holidays shared. Take the early 1900s. Within 20 years, half the foreignness in baby names vanished. Evidence shows newcomers assimilate into society. Learning from each other, fusion cuisines, new music, entrepreneurship, all strengthen the nation. You call it dilution, I call it renewal. Like a rainforest thrives on many species, a society thrives on multiple cultures. Embrace it and watch society flourish. Resist it and you ignore humanity's story.
Culture is not just data, it's identity. In some towns, rapid change has provoked backlash. Languages you don't understand at dinner table, unfamiliar customs at festivals. Social cohesion takes time and trust. Too many changes too quickly can fuel segregation and tension. Imagine living next door to someone who doesn't speak your language or share your values. Integration isn't guaranteed. We risk creating parallel societies. Even strong democracies struggle with this. We're not anti-immigrant, just pro-cohesion. Controlled flows, assimilation policies, language classes. The promise of a melting pot only works if people are willing to melt. And that willingness can be fragile.
Identity versus integration. Judges. Switching gears. What about national security? Are borders necessary to keep us safe?
Security is vital, but blanket bans aren't the solution. The majority of U.S. terror attacks have been committed by citizens or long-term residents, not new immigrants. Meanwhile, many immigrants serve in the military, police, and intelligence. Community policing studies show that trusted immigrant neighbors can actually improve local security. Importantly, deporting masses can weaken intelligence cooperation by driving communities underground. In other words, smart vetting and law enforcement, not open hostility, keep us safe. We should trust institutions and data, not cynicism, to protect the country.
Security isn't theoretical. History has examples of border lapses leading to attacks. A single unchecked border crossing could smuggle a terrorist in. We have intelligence that certain extremists exploit migrant routes. Do we roll the dice with our people's safety? Governments and citizens have a first duty to security. If that means tighter controls and temporary bans in crisis, so be it. Opening our gates without restrictions is like leaving our front door wide open and hoping for the best. No one expects zero immigrants, but out of balance, we face danger. I value cooperation, but never at the price of watching bombs hit our streets.
Safety versus solidarity. Judges. Last question of this chapter. How do we balance immigration with environmental limits?
Environmental justice cuts both ways. Migrants often arrive by burning fuels or unsafe journeys, but once settled, many drive sustainable innovation, green businesses, renewable projects, new farmers markets. Also, neglecting poverty abroad can worsen climate crises. Helping people migrate can reduce pressure on fragile ecosystems. Think globally. A family escaping drought can be greener in a new country than staying. The world's population distributes differently, but smart immigration, skills-based, climate refugees considered, can actually ease strain by spreading humanity more evenly. Closing doors won't stop climate change, but cooperation and science will.
Look at Earth's limits. More people means more carbon, water, deforestation. Even with better tech, our planet may not support unlimited growth. Each immigrant raises demand on local resources, energy, housing, food. If everyone moved to wealthy countries, consumption skyrockets. We heard, haven't we enough population? Social planners say so. Plus, developed nations are often biggest polluters. Adding more residence risks, busting climate goals. We should invest in aid and technology abroad, not import the problem. In short, migration has an environmental footprint, and we must factor that in like any policy.
Green concerns enter the fray. Judges? The stakes. Global inequality. Should wealthy nations open borders or build walls?
As long as 99% of humanity has 1% of wealth, migration can equalize opportunity. Think of it. Allowing free labor movement is a moral and economic policy. Poor workers relieve poverty by moving. Rich economies get manpower. Nobel laureate Ken Arrow even said open migration would make everyone better off. By raising incomes for migrants, remittances help communities. Border barriers, meanwhile, perpetuate injustice of birth lottery. We have visas for skilled workers. Why not for all human beings? If borders don't exist for goods, why for people who need work?
That's a utopian view. Nation-states are not global unions. Each country has sovereignty and its own social contract. Uncontrolled migration could devastate local wages and social systems. We saw that in regions where labor influx was abrupt, crime rises, wages fall, resentment grows. If one country opens fully, every job undercuts another. We need orderly migration, quotas, and skills tests, not a blanket right. In reality, even global courts don't mandate open borders. Fixing inequality abroad is a separate moral endeavor. It doesn't grant anyone the automatic right to relocate here.
Equity versus sovereignty. Judges? On that note, think of democracy. Should countries decide by vote or ignore public will?
Leadership sometimes leads public opinion. If citizens oppose migration out of fear, that can signal misinformation or xenophobia, not justice. In some elections, fear of immigrants has flipped governments, not necessarily reflecting economic truth. Educating and guiding society is government's role. True democracy includes rights for minorities and future generations. Sometimes courts overrule popular vote to protect human rights. So yes, countries can choose leadership and policy to uphold moral values, not just short-term majorities.
Are you arguing against democracy? Every citizen has a say, and currently many say restrict immigration. Leaders who ignore this are undemocratic. Open borders would be imposed by technocrats, not voted in. That breeds populism. Look at how many countries swung hard right when elites bypassed elections. A government disconnected from voters will eventually collapse. We must trust ballot boxes. If people want tighter controls, that's legitimate. Promise of moral leadership rings hollow if it ignores what citizens demand.
Experts versus electorate. Judges? We're in the final round. Imagine the consequences. What future does each path lead to?
Unlimited immigration means a global meritocracy. Brightest people anywhere contribute wherever they can. History shows flows eventually stabilize. Over decades, economies with open policies adapt, like Silicon Valley grew from diverse founders, or Germany overcame labor gaps with guest workers. In 50 years, an aging society without migrants risks collapse. Philosophically, building a global community can reduce conflicts. I see convergence. Poverty falls, incomes rise worldwide, and yes, borders blur. The future is interconnected. Fighting it is like fighting the tide.
Or consider the alternative future. Countries overwhelmed, clashing, coastal towns flooding with migrants, native cultures lost, resentment fueling nationalism. Those trails already stretch from Italy to Texas. Tech can't offset every migrant job, and welfare systems crack. The young men of large families crowd cities, underemployed or scorned. Democracy could falter under identity politics. I predict islands of prosperity closing ranks, not a neat global utopia. Stability often requires limits. In my view, the next decades must carefully calibrate migration to maintain social fabric and security, not abandon it.
Final arguments in the balance. Judges, deliver your verdict. One truth endures. Data, values, and fears collide in the immigration debate. In the end, the question isn't just economic or moral, but what kind of world we choose to live in. Each argument has merit, each warning worth our heed. So which side will you judge? The future of borders depends on choices made today, and that battle continues.